Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning. My name is Lance French. I'm the business development manager at W&M Environmental, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on spill response. Our experts for today are W&M's regional manager, Diana Rader, from our Austin office.
Good morning.
And from our Houston office, W&M's division manager, Austin Heider.
Good morning, Lance.
And thank you guys for joining us. I know that you're thrilled to be here. So,
absolutely.
Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please send them to me through your webinar. Go to webinar chat tab. If we don't get to your question, which we always do, but if we don't, I'll make sure that Diana and Austin sees it and answer it as soon as possible. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available to rewatch on our website soon, along with the slides. And the slides are actually already on the website. So if you want to go on our website, go to the blog that Austin wrote on planning to fail. You're planning to fail or failing to plan, or if you're planning, it's on the back. It's on there. Yeah,
something along those lines.
It's in our blog tab. It was really good blog. Congratulations, by the way. So I will send you an email with the link when they're made available. It'll probably be tomorrow, but it might be this afternoon, but I'm going to say tomorrow afternoon to be safe. Okay, so let's get to it. So I want to introduce you to our presenters. Diana Rader, she's a PG, which is a professional geologist, not parental guidance.
No.
Okay, so
I could do that too, though.
She has overseen many spill responses for large and small spills all across Texas. She is a principal and regional manager based in our Austin office. And she is our Longhorn for the University of Texas. And so we can't have a webinar without having somebody from Texas A&M. So Austin is an environmental geoscience graduate of Texas A&M, and his experience includes multiple spill responses and remediation projects. And he is a principal and division manager in our W&M Houston office. So did I miss anything?
Gig
'em? Okay, so we're gonna have a little contest. So we have to have a truce that there'll be no smack talk because football season's starting. We can wait until the end of our webinar. And then
we'll tone it down.
Yeah, we'll try to be nice to each other.
Oh, good year. Okay, so Austin, I want to start off with this question because there was a little bit of confusion on my part, I guess, a little bit. So what's the difference between emergency response and spill response? Because we're going to be mainly focusing on spill response. I kind of thought they were the same thing. You have a spill, you need to take care of it. So can you go over what the differences between the two?
Sure. No, good question. And the two go hand in hand. So emergency response and spill response go hand in hand. The emergency is the immediate action. And so I like to think of it as the spill. Where it happened, you have to identify the spill, you have to stop the spill, control it, and contain it. That's your emergency. Once your emergency has stopped and you've proceeded, you need to delineate, you need to remediate, you need to remove the source and remove the spill. So at that point, when you're into a spill, it's not quite an emergency. You've kind of identified, contained, controlled, and the chaos has stopped.
Okay, so the spill, you said 48 hours. Is that general, or is there a time period where
there's not really a time period? Your emergency, I like to consider it the first 24 hours because those are the most crucial. But the emergency response is the first 24. Your spill response is usually within the first 48. Sometimes they can be at the same time. Sometimes your emergency response contractor could be your spill response contractor.
Okay. So who do you contact? So
sure. Yeah. All spills need to be reported within 24 hours of identification. For this webinar, we're focusing on the state of Texas. I'd like to acknowledge that other states also have established spill rules, spill hotlines. And so for Texas, we have the Texas Spill Reporting Hotline, CIRC. The number's there. We also want to make sure we identify our local regional office for TCQ and make sure they're contacted. There's also the federal hotline. If you identify that you need to report it to the federal hotline, the National Response Center is there. And an important thing, most people know this, but you need to put your emergency response ticket in. If you're digging, excavating soil, digging deeper than 16 inches, you can have that immediate ticket acknowledged and approved in an emergency situation.
Oops, sorry.
And so, how do we know it's reportable? The EPA has established a great table. It's in 40 CFR 302.4. It identifies the final reportable quantities for EPA hazardous substances. It's a long list. It's very important, especially once you identify the chemicals that you have on site. It's always good to document, have maybe a little cheat sheet on the reportable quantities associated with those chemicals you have stored on site in case there is a spill or release. And so for Texas, I've mentioned the TCEQ. The standard regulatory agencies we usually see are the Railroad Commission of Texas or the TCEQ, but there's also the General Land Office of Texas, Texas Park and Wildlife Department, Department of Public Safety, and also the Department of State Health and Services. And so there's certain situations where you would fall under, a spill would fall under one or the other organization. Those are defined on whether they're on land or into water, or if it's a crude or unrefined crude, if it's exploration production. Your type of spill will determine which regulatory agency that you're going to be reporting to.
Okay. So we went through those slides pretty fast, and I just want to emphasize we're not done, but we're just saying that is for emergency response.
Correct. That's a refresher.
Yeah.
Most people have a plan established.
Yeah.
They maybe have gone through the drill once before, have had a spill. But just a quick refresher on, who to call, what the reportable quantities are, and who the jurisdiction is.
Okay, excellent. So we don't do emergency response, but we can help anybody that's listening out there to help establish an emergency response.
Certainly.
Okay.
We can help with the plan.
Okay.
And identify contractors.
Okay. So I'm going to put this in layman's terms. So if I spill a carton of milk and in my kitchen, boom. The emergency response is to pick up the milk and then stop the spill, correct?
Pick up your carton
and then
the milk stop.
Making sure that the milk doesn't go on the floor, right?
Right. Stop it from spreading.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
So then the spill response is, okay, once that's done, then I can go figure out, do I need to get the paper towel?
Yeah.
Do I need to get
something bigger?
Like something bigger. Okay. And then there's always tears because you always cry over spilled milk, right?
But you shouldn't,
okay,
right? If you listen to your mother.
Yeah. I'm sure we don't have anybody crying over spills, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So 7 keys to success. It's just kind of we wanted you to walk away with 7 things that you could get out of this webinar to saying that, hey, I have a successful spill. Does that sound right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a such thing as a successful spill?
A spill, no. It's probably not successful if you had a spill, but we've came up with 7 things to think about or to prepare yourself to maybe ease the pain of the spill. And have a successful response to the spill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So you guys are probably all wondering, what are those 7 things? And there's probably more than 7, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And we're going to go in these in a lot more detail, but these are the 7 that we want to talk about today. Like, who's in charge? That's important. And I would say that these are not in particular order, but number 1 is probably number 1. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So the other remediation, contractors, and consultants. Austin's going to talk a little bit about that. Waste management. You got to know if it's spilled. You got to know where it goes, right? Cleanup requirements. Safety plan. You have to do it safe, right? You don't want to put anybody in danger. Assessment and path to closure. I think that's going to be kind of the meat of this, right? It's like, hey, once you get the spill, how do you get it to be not spilled? I'm just kidding. You can laugh, Austin. It's okay. Yeah. And then the final, the last but not least, reporting, because you can't have
if you don't report it, it didn't happen.
Yeah, you have to have a good report. So, okay. So, Diana, we're going to start with you. So, who's in charge? Why is that so important?
It's important to know. So, say you're the environmental manager, emergency response coordinator for your company. It's important for everyone else to know that you're in charge of making the decisions for that spill response. And if it's important for everyone to know who is in charge, and you have one person calling the shots, essentially. And it's important for you to know if you are that person. Do you know it? That's the worst, when everyone else thinks you're the one and you didn't realize you were the one. So that's the first point of who's in charge. The other is that does everyone understand? We've worked in instances or situations where multiple people thought they were in charge, or the person that was in charge wasn't available. They were out of town, so someone else took charge, but not everyone knew that. So consultants still reported to one person, contractors reported to another person. It was a difficult situation until it got resolved. So
And
not the best approach.
I'd add to that, Diana, it's good to have a chain of command, an organizational chart. That way, in case, like you said, somebody's out of town, who's next in line? And so option A, B, and C. Let's not resort just to one option controlling everything. So have that chain of command identified and know who's in charge.
Yeah. And certainly you had that probably if you had really an emergency response, but sometimes you don't have much of an emergency, or as you move to spill response, things change.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
I think in your blog you mentioned that spills aren't really convenient, and so you never know when they're going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what if the person that you put in charge, or who is decided is in charge, what if they're on vacation? So you probably need to have a plan B, maybe a plan B and C.
Yep, that's right.
So so it's important. So so we all want to know who's in charge, but obviously Charles is in charge. And so if you have somebody in your organization, they're in charge. So it leads to the question, who are you going to call?
Yeah,
right?
so I'm the environmental manager, say, for my company. We had a spill. Who am I going to call? I can't clean it up by myself.
So obviously the answer
It's Ghostbusters. Who else would you call?
I would guarantee you most of our listeners, when you said, who are you going to call? They said no. They said Ghostbusters. I guarantee you that.
I want Bill Murray on my side.
That's right. Okay, so that's important. You need to make sure that there's at least one voice directing everybody. Otherwise, you have a lot of cooks barking out orders everywhere, and maybe not particularly to somebody that's into the air.
And what's important, and Austin will talk about this more, is before the spill happens, you've already figured that out.
Okay, very good. Okay, so, we're going to launch our polls. I wasn't prepared. I'm sorry. Okay, so usually I'm prepared, but so we're going to ask our audience, does your facility have a spill response? So I'm going to launch that now. A spill response plan, yes. So I'm going to launch it now. So the answers for our panel, because y'all can't see the answers, are absolutely, pretty sure, not sure, or yes, we panic yell, and everyone screams orders to no one in particular. So. We have one that says, yes, we panic. So we need to talk to you after this. So, because I would imagine panicking is not, you don't want to panic in that situation. I'm sure it happens.
Right.
Because
it's human nature.
Yeah. So, because it's pretty scary. So
it's the call you don't want to receive.
Okay. So the good news is everybody has a plan. 80% absolutely have their plan.
That's great.
But 20%, say they're in the panic mode. So
it's okay to
So 20%, we're totally honest.
As long as you have a plan. If you're panicking but you have a plan,
you're still okay.
Yes. Right. Okay, good. Well, yeah, so you're honest, and that's good. So but the good news is nobody said they don't have a plan. So good. So I'm going to close that, and we're going to go to remediation, contractors, and consultants. So Austin, why is this important on?
It's very important. Diana mentioned to it, and we talked about it earlier. So the remediation contractor, I see them as the 48-hour team. They can be there from the get-go, or they need to be there within the 48 hours to start building the story, identifying the initial spill, the quantity, where it was at, where it was contained. So that response team is critical for establishing. I'm sorry.
No, my bad.
Back there. Is critical for establishing that. And so if you're the environmental manager, you typically have these remediation contractors or consultants already established. They're usually approved. They have proper certificates of insurance, proper certifications, proper training, and they're set up with your company. And along with that, they probably have the proper equipment, personnel, experience. They have a proven track record. And they could be 2 or 3 different types of contractors or consultants. Some of them are going to be the ones that are monitoring maybe doing personal protection monitoring or air monitoring, the soil sample collection. And then you might have some are the yellow irons. They're working on remediating the soil, digging out the soil, helping with transport and disposal of the soil. So there's more than one in there at times, but sometimes some of them are all inclusive. And so location is important. Identifying where your facilities are, knowing those operations, and identifying if those remediation contractors have time to respond. Are they within an hour? Are they within 12 hours? When a spill occurs, you need to get out there immediately. So location and response time are extremely important when identifying the proper contractors for your facilities.
Okay, so we have, we have pipelines going through Texas, and there's companies that have those pipelines. So I'm sure that there's going to be areas where you're going to need. Not every contractor because you don't know when the spill or where the spill is. So you're going to probably have, is there sections that you need? It's like, okay, if it's north of Austin, it's going to be this contractor. If it's south.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
So
it's good to think that through ahead of time because you don't want to be dealing with that. And yeah.
So, and Austin said something else where he said, can they respond? Well, that changes too. So do you have to call your contractors and say, hey, in case we have a problem, are y'all available this week? That is a big deal. Okay. See, I'm winging it. And y'all thought of everything.
And something we didn't say earlier, but the point of what we're talking about today is spill response. But as Austin said,
it's easy to
jump ahead.
Yeah.
As Austin said, though, there's the overlap between emergency response or responders and spill response. So sometimes it's the same contractors, but it is important to note when you've changed. We're not in the emergency response mode anymore. We're now doing spill response.
And is there a big meeting that says, okay, stop, y'all go home, emergency response people, we got it?
Lots of times it happens. Yeah.
How does that transition happen?
Well, sometimes if it doesn't get said, it should have been said because it can be very costly to be in that emergency response mode longer than you need to be. Okay. You don't want to have equipment on your staged on site. You might need to have all kinds of expensive equipment staged on site during emergency response, and you're paying for it. But once you're past that, it's good to say, okay, we're stopped. Let's let that stuff go, and we're going to regroup and start over.
Cost-wise, it's easy to make sure that, hey, we don't keep.
Let's all agree.
The faster you can transition into the spill phase, the less cost you're gonna.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my next question. Has anybody expedited that where they've sent the emergency people home too soon when they should? They transition too quickly.
I'm sure there is the case.
Yeah, I haven't been involved with that.
I haven't seen it because you need to make sure the handoff is established and the story is established. So the last thing you want to do is move it to the spill response phase when you're not done with the containing, stopping the spill.
But you guys have witnessed the fumbling of the transition.
Certainly, just hindsight's 2020. So you can look back and say, oh, we could have switched sooner.
What's the biggest key that you guys have seen? I'm sure you're just going to say communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly. And just awareness too that.
Yeah. Okay. And then having who's in charge is important.
Exactly.
So that way, okay. See, we're kind of tying it all together. This is nice. This is good. Okay. So that brings us to waste management. So
when you have a spill, you generally generate waste, right? That everything that spilled material touches becomes contaminated, and you're going to have to deal with it. Here we're looking at a picture from a big spill. So we had lots of contaminated soil, and we also had contaminated liquids, and had to deal with it. I had to figure out what to do with it pretty quickly. Things to consider with respect to waste are that you need to characterize that waste. Do you know, sitting here today, you don't have a spill, but are you prepared? So do you have an idea of what kind of spills you could have in terms of what materials, chemicals do you use? Do you transport as part of your operations? And then how can you, where can you dispose of them? What will you do with the liquids? And do you have that figured out ahead of time? I think you can go to the next slide. So certainly the waste classification is an important component of that. So you may have already done that as part of your emergency response phase where you identified a disposal facility, you characterized that waste so that that facility would take it, you got a waste profile. Now you're in the spill response phase. Can you, things were chaotic in emergency response. You probably took the conservative route, maybe considered it's all a class 1 non-hazardous waste, so I'm going to send it to this facility and probably pay a little bit more, but that's what I need to do. Now we're in spill response phase, and maybe some of our waste is class 2 non-haz, and I can dispose of it a little cheaper. Maybe I can segregate my waste. I have a little more time, and maybe I want to spend a little money on characterizing that waste for that purpose.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see, or is it just, planning?
Sometimes it's planning. I think something I've seen the most of is misclassification of waste. Diana mentioned sometimes you're in a hurry. You need to be conservative. You need to get the stuff off site. So maybe not knowing your chemical inventory, your waste streams, and misclassifying it based off of unknown knowledge or the inexperience. And so sometimes we've seen hazardous waste get classified in that manner, but it should be a class 1. And when you're talking the difference between, non-haz class 1. So the difference there is cost. It's extremely expensive to dispose of hazardous waste. If you can define it as a non-haz class 1 waste, you're saving yourself quite a bit of money. And hazardous waste can only be accepted at certain landfills, which are probably not conveniently located near your facilities. Class 1 non-haz and class 2 non-haz waste are generally there's a lot more as far as locations. If you're in the major cities or even out in the middle of nowhere, likely you're going to find class 1 or class 2 non-haz waste easier than you would a hazardous waste.
And you guys see that where they probably are thinking, when in doubt, it's haz, and so they're going to take, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
And nothing wrong with that. Just good to know that when you move to spill response, maybe you take the time to change that. That's a good time to change. Another consideration is your company's maybe through their risk management policies, they've identified certain disposal facilities they do not want you to use. Or maybe in special circumstances you could use them, but it's good to be aware of that ahead of time so that you can address it. The other is if your operations include handling of PCBs, asbestos, radioactive materials, things that are have special disposal requirements, know that in advance too and be ready to deal with it.
Yeah, and there are some wastes that have exemptions. They wouldn't require sampling. There are oil and gas exploration exemptions within the state of Texas that material can go to
a railroad commission permitted
permitted landfill for railroad commission operations.
So I'm probably going to hit on this, and I don't know why I'm hitting on this because I'm not even really in charge of this webinar, but I am. But the thing is, I guess planning, it really plays a key because there's only certain, if you really plan in a warehouse, I know if I have a spill on these things, these are going to, so if you already know if this spills, this is what I do. If this spills, this is what I do. So you're not panicking when it does happen, then you're going.
And learning on the fly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, okay.
Yep. So here, another thing to consider now you're in spill response phase, does it have to be waste? That's the other, you may be generating a lot of soil, contaminated soil. So are there other things you could do? Could the material be recycled? Can you land farm? Know that those options are out there as well and worth taking the time.
Okay. All right. So this is going to our next poll question, which is, how do you know if your spill is reportable? So, so are there spills that you don't have to, is that the question really?
Yeah.
Okay,
how do you, audience, know if your spill is reportable?
Yeah. So I shouldn't really ask y'all a question because that would be given away. I learned on the fly. So
what are your options? What are your potential? What are the answers?
Okay. So that's right. You guys can't see it. So, I know my RQs, which is
reportable
quantities. I know my reporting agencies, which we saw them. I know I guesstimate what I see. And is guesstimate a real word, or is it just a word that we make up? I just
We
wondered.
made it up.
All right. And all the above. And we have a fifth question, which is I am exempt. So I'm going to let them, what do you guys think?
No idea.
All right. Well, okay. So I'm going to keep it open just for a few more minutes. Seconds, not minutes, because we're running out of minutes, actually. Okay. I'm closing it right now. So 3, 2, 1. Okay. It's
no
closed.
one answered.
No, they did. So we have 36% say that they know their RQs, reportable quantities.
Woohoo.
I know. 7% says I know my reporting agency. And 57% said all the above.
Oh, there you go.
So
That's good.
Good. The majority was correct.
the
On that
majority
one.
was
Yeah.
correct. So it was kind of a trick. We tricked you a little bit, because if you got it, you kind of got some of it. But why is all three of those important?
So we've already touched on the RQs. We've already touched on the regulatory agencies, and I guess guesstimate could be.
Certainly, that's allowed.
A tricky.
Visual estimate. is
But
allowed.
yeah, we need to identify what the quantity is. And, at that point, once the spill occurred, were we out there at the initial point of the spill, or was it identified 2 or 3 hours later? So it's an estimation on the quantity that was generated during the spill. So guesstimating absolutely is appropriate. You have to report the quantity when you're calling it in. So,
And we've seen it can change over time, right?
Absolutely.
What gets reported at
'Cause
the
you don't
time you
know.
notify, exactly.
It looks
As
like,
you
yeah.
get more information, you have a better idea.
Okay. So I see a lot of chemical nerd stuff on this. So this one must be yours, Austin, right?
absolutely.
Everybody get your pen protectors.
I'm not a
out. Let's go.
chemist, but I just like the diagram there.
IPs.
We talk about BTEX with Railroad Commission, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylenes. That's a common contaminant. It's what we're looking for when we're cleaning up Railroad Commission sites. So, once we've identified our regulatory agency, the two that I'll talk about because they're the most common would be the TCQ and Railroad Commission spills. We need to identify our chemicals of concern. What was spilled? For TCQ, it could be specific chemicals. Maybe it was just a slop line, or it was a benzene line, or it was a xylene line. We need to identify what those chemicals of concern are, so we can be prepared for sampling of certain medias. For the Railroad Commission, we're looking at typically strictly TPH, total petroleum hydrocarbons, BTEX, and we may require additional chemicals of concern for reportings to clean up below the protection limits. If we're on an exploration production site, we may have drilling fluids or mud that may have some metals in it. So there may be some additional chemicals that we're looking at there. But the TCQ requires removal of the source to background or to previous site conditions. The Railroad Commission requires 1% total TPH by weight removal. And as I mentioned, BTEX and maybe additional COCs to the protective limits. Then we also have to think about if it's a lease and the landowner. If it's a pipeline agreement or an exploration production pad, are there additional cleanup requirements? Does the landowner want the property restored to its condition prior to the spill? That can take a lot more time and cost a lot more money than if we're looking at a TCQ or a Railroad Commission spill. So those are all things to consider.
The important point of this is knowing as early as possible what the endpoint will be, right? Figure out, what am I cleaning up to?
Okay. Yeah. You can't just use paper towel. You have to use,
Yeah, well, do you have to clean all the milk, or can you leave a little milk on the
No,
counter?
you can't leave it on the milk, but
you want mama to be mad?
and it depends on what was in the milk. 'Cause did you put quick
Chocolate milk?
You put chocolate milk in there, then you have to, you can't just let it dry, because then you get ants.
That's exactly right.
Can you
Cannot have
discussion
ants.
before you have- Okay, so a safety plan.
Yeah, so talk about safety, and this is brief, but of course, I assume you would have a safety plan already established as part of your emergency response. But as you switch to spill response, be aware that your site conditions are changing, possibly daily as you're taking your spill response action. You're digging up soil. You may be exposing workers to vapors if you're digging in a really hot zone, and maybe realize I need to do personal monitoring or wear respirators during certain activities. As you move along in that process, it may not be necessary anymore. So know that your safety plan might need to change as you go. and be aware of that. And your safety practices, your personal protection might change as you go through the process, and an important thing to be aware of. I know we've had some large projects where we've had a safety consultant on site. We had a large excavation, and so there was someone there with that expertise that observed our activities and would shut down work if need be.
So just to be safe.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess we'll have this poll question. Do we want to do this poll question?
Sure.
Okay, so the poll question is, how many past spills have gone perfectly to plan? And we're kind of tongue in cheek, but this is kind of serious. Maybe
they do.
Maybe they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask you guys, have you guys ever had one that gone perfectly to plan? Like it was just the best spill ever.
Well, having a spill isn't perfect, so no.
Right.
Some are easier than others, though. Some are, you can tell people
but as far
are
as the
planned.
spill goes, we knocked it out
No.
of the park. There's never one of
No.
those. Never.
No.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, so far everybody's saying yes.
Oh, awesome.
So there's a
That's great.
Okay. Oh, you know what? Hold on. I think so. Yeah.
Because you said how many?
No. So what happened? Something happened in our poll questioning. So we launched the wrong poll. So, so that's my fault. So you got to laugh on your behalf or nothing. So the poll that we actually launched was, should you document a non-reportable spill?
Yeah. Okay.
And
good.
I just got a text
yes.
saying that, hey, wrong question. So
okay. Good.
So 91% said yes. So we're a little bit. We don't have to do that poll next, but
that's good. All right, we can skip this one.
Okay, we can skip. All right. So, okay, attachment and path to closure. Austin,
this is me. Yeah, I'll grab this one. Assessment and path closure. So we've talked a lot about soil. I'd like to, make sure we're talking about all affected media here. This could be a waterway. This could be sediment. So we need to be mindful of what media was affected during a spill. So again, we're talking TCQ and Railroad Commission. So the TCQ has established spill rules under 30 TAC 327, Texas Administrative Code. And so the important thing is sample collection, delineation, and the horizontal and vertical extent. Make sure we have that model built and we know where we are. And then we need to remediate that. So once we've developed our plan, we can go in and remediate the soil. We can remediate potential surface waters. And the same goes with the Railroad Commission. Statewide rules 820 and 91 are guidelines for this. And so I've already kind of mentioned what we're remediating to. So for TCQ purposes, you have 180 days to remediate your spill to background concentrations or pre-existing conditions. Diana will touch on this in a little bit, but there's a 30-day status report that goes in there. If we're not cleaned up in 30 days, we typically request an extension, and that extension is granted for 180 days from the date of the spill. And after those 180 days, the spill rules no longer apply. They're going to kick you into a regulatory program. That's the TCQ Corrective Action Program. So be prepared for that. Time is of the essence here.
So do you guys ever have a situation where you have to change the path after the assessment or change your assessment?
I was going to say the thing I've seen that may be an issue, or is most frequently happens, is there's not enough assessment, or that you wish you'd done more assessment before you chose your path to closure. And of course, more data is always good. I understand you can't study a site to death, but hindsight, you often wish you would have realized that you didn't delineate vertically, or maybe the plume migrated during that downtime between emergency response and spill response. Sometimes there's a gap there, and that wasn't factored in, and so the path might not be the best one.
Are you speaking from experience on that, or
yes?
You don't want to
details.
Details, okay. So it does happen. So I guess spills, you can't necessarily predict where they might go?
Well, you don't know the subsurface conditions a lot of times. So you could be in a fractured clay where you can't predict where the liquids will go. There may be other conditions that you realize later weren't the best. Excavating soil might not have been the best approach had you had more data. You could maybe do less excavation and get to the end point quicker, leave some in place, use risk-based rules.
Yeah, I've seen. So I talked to about waste misclassification, and I have seen a case where maybe they weren't sure of which program they should go through. Was it considered railroad commission, or was it considered a TCQ spill? It was an unrefined crude product that was going through a pipeline. At some point in that process, when it left the pad, maybe there was a water or some sort of treatment in the process. Some addition that maybe changed the state of that crude and became from unrefined to a refined crude. And there was a question whether is it this or the other. And so when you're talking crude unrefined versus refined, it could fall between railroad commission or TCQ. So you have to identify which one it is. So the original thought was, well, we're going the railroad commission path, but in the end, it was actually a TCQ spill. So knowing what's going through the line for a pipeline, or knowing your material, can help identify that process faster. So you don't fall through.
So what happens there? I mean,
well, you've made your notifications, and you've got to.
Usually the regulatory agencies will work together to figure it out.
Yeah, you'll typically see responders from each agency come out, and so there's some talks going on, some meetings, and typically there's a determination made pretty quickly. Yeah. But there's definitely some unknowns, and the faster you can figure it out, the better. And so conservatively, you want to know what that process is.
Yeah, people to just report to both.
Yes,
I'm just going to report to everybody. If we don't know,
right? We have had that, and we'll have, like you said, both agencies respond, or multiple agencies respond, and we've had sites where it took them weeks to figure it out who had jurisdiction. But you keep moving, right? You're still gonna do your spill response.
Okay, so we're a little bit ahead, believe it or not, which is good. So my question is, why Railroad Commission? Why do they have anything to do with spills when you would think that they would just have to do with railroads and trains?
Yeah,
I mean, or if a spill happened on a train. But why is that?
The Railroad Commission regulates oil and gas exploration and production activities related to that. I think, Austin, you can expand on that.
Yeah, so it's exploration, production, or development of oil, gas, or geothermal resources. And so I mentioned the unrefined crude product, and so that's kind of what we're focusing on here. But it excludes highway transportation. It excludes railroad transportation.
It excludes railroad transportation.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a refined product at that point when it's going in. You typically have your pipelines or your transportation for unrefined product.
Yeah, so if it's refined, it's TCQ, and if it's crude or unrefined, it would be Railroad Commission.
All right.
That's all you need to know.
It didn't really answer my question, but if there are any
I
listeners,
could send you some reading materials. On
a train derailment and a spill of a train derailment falls under the TCQ jurisdiction.
See, but you know what? We love you, Railroad Commission. So if anybody out there listening, thank you
We're all good.
for everything you do. Okay. Okay. So the most important part, not really.
No.
The most fun? No.
Yeah, no.
Tedious? Okay, so we're talking about reporting. So I'm assuming that after you get everything cleaned up.
Well, all along the way, there's reporting. That's right. And so the first bullet there says documentation is key. So you need to keep track of everything from the beginning to make your life easier in the end. So we talk about here, well, there's all kinds of reporting, as I said. So you have regulatory reporting. That's easy for you to say. TCQ, Railroad Commission primarily, and I'll talk more about that in a second. You have internal reporting, and then third-party requirements. So regulatory reporting, the TCQ requires a 30-day status report, which includes a lot of information You have to provide a response chronology. So what the spill was, the details of the spill, who was out there, what you did to contain it and stop it. You include meteorology, reported injuries, and then remediation activities. And they want to know how much was recovered and contained and how much was lost to the environment. At 30 days, you may not know that. So you tell them what you do know. What you're in that 30-day report, you also need to indicate you may be done by that time. So you include all that information and you're finished. If you're not, you may know that I need another 100, or I need 180 days from the date of the spill to figure this out. And I think I can get it cleaned up. So you could tell them that and request the extension. Or you may know that this is going to take years to clean up. I can't do it in 6 months. And so I request they will want you to tell them why and what you've done and what your schedule is for cleanup. But at that time, you can request to be basically referred to the corrective action section anyway of the TCEQ, and you'll clean up under the TRP rules, Texas Risk Reduction Program. So that's at the 30-day process. Then at 180 days, you'll essentially provide a lot of that same information, but it'll be your closure report. So you'll also have quite a bit of information on sampling and analysis. You also need to include any waste classification, disposal records. But again, a big thing is the amount that was recovered from the spill and the amount that was lost to the environment. And that can get pretty tricky. And so it's good to know from the beginning that question will be asked. So save your information, be ready to document that. Internal reporting includes things like daily field reports. So your people that are out on site, are they giving you the information you need to report back to your management? It may include photos, maps, samples collected, who visited the site, safety, did your safety plan change? You had changing conditions, all kinds of things. But it's important if you're the one in charge to let those people know, I need this information and I need it every day. Here's what I want to see. And it might change through time as you figure out what you need. We talked about reportable versus non-reportable. So if you have a non-reportable spill, how much of this documentation do you keep on file and collect as you go? It's something to consider and know ahead of time. And then internal financial reporting is also important. Usually your management, if you're that responsible or site coordinator, wants to know how much is it going to cost me to clean up this site? And so are you getting the information from your contractors, consultants to be able to put together a reasonable estimate? And then, of course, third-party requirements. If someone other than, in addition to TCQ, Railroad Commission, are you needing to provide information to maybe the insurance company if you're filing a claim? Maybe there's a landowner, something like that. That's another important reporting requirement.
So do you guys see difference from state to state? I mean, are the rules pretty much the same, or just a little bit nuances, or some of them just they're completely different?
Very widely.
Really?
Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I've responded in Louisiana, New Mexico, and they definitely differ as far as timelines go and requirements go. But the important thing is the immediate response and reaction to what has occurred. So
cleaning up the spill,
yes.
Documenting it. So kind of highlights on the reporting chronology. You want to start keeping track from the beginning. It's hard to piece it together later on. The spilled volume versus a recovered volume. So how many vac trucks did you run? How much, what was the volume, liquid and solid, that was recovered? As much information as you can keep from the beginning, it will be useful later. Of course, your manifests or bills of lading, all of that will be important information in terms of documenting what went off site. And then consider that evaporations or emissions are also might be considered and then reported, air emissions.
So we're not going to do this poll because we already did it. So I'll just launch the results. How's that? That makes it a little bit easier. If I can do that right, should I document a non-reported spill? So I'll share it. So 92% said yes. 8% said I'd make a note of it. So Austin, why is it why should you document a non-reportable spill?
You should document any spill for internal purposes, so you can identify when the event happened, and it's for record keepings. Maybe you're being audited that day. Somebody's on site. They want to make sure you're keeping proper records of what the events that actually occurred, rather than just ignoring the situation and sweeping it under the rug. So,
and if you can show a past history, here I've documented all these spills in the past, the auditor usually gives them a much higher level of confidence.
All right. Well, I will hide those results.
Another consideration is if you have a property transaction or ownership change in your facility, and that becomes a valuable piece of information, that we have spills and we know people have spills, but if you can show that you did manage them properly, even if they weren't reportable, that serves you well.
So I'm going to open up the questions here. So we're about to recap here. See, that wasn't that bad, guys.
No.
You got it through it. That was pretty good. Y'all did really well. But I want to open up while I'm going through this the 7 keys, is to send any questions that you guys have, whether it be specific to a project that you have or something, or just a question. So I'll give you guys time. Usually I say, y'all have any questions? And I give them like 10 seconds to do it. And I'm like, okay, we're out of here. Bye. So, but here's the 7 keys again, because here at W&M we like repetition. So, but who's in charge? I think that is really, really important. It makes a lot of sense. Remediation and contractors and consultants, knowing your waste management, knowing how to classify it, where it needs to go. If I'm wrong on any of this, you let me know. But I know I'm right. Right.
There you go.
Cleanup requirements. Different spills have different requirements to go, so you need to know what involves in that. Safety, because safety is always important. Safety. Assessment and path to closure. Assess it correctly, and then get it done. Right. Was there anything else that we can explain on that one?
No.
Better. Okay, I like that.
No,
You like
that's
that?
simplified.
All right, good. And then reporting, because you gotta let everybody know what you did,
And you're done.
Yeah. So, but that's great. So, and of course, I opened up, and there's no questions. Oh, I spoke too soon. Hold on. Okay, let me pull it up. So I don't know if this is a question or if this is a statement, but we're gonna hold on. Y'all talk amongst yourselves for a second. I'm teasing.
Are the Aggies and the Longhorns ever going to play football again against each other?
Our schedule is too busy.
Y'all really not playing each other this year?
No, we haven't in years. Since 2011 was the
that's
last game.
Really?
Yeah, they left
How
the
have
conference.
I not known that? I knew that, but
Then we quit playing each other in football. We played baseball.
Other
basketball.
sports. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is. So this isn't a question. This is more of a comment. So this comes from one of our listeners. Century-old RRC originally had jurisdiction because crude was moved by rail, and they regulated rail. So they regulated oil and gas.
That's awesome.
That's all changed now. This is before roads and pipelines out west. So
that's right.
Thank you for that history lesson. But
Yeah,
before it
that's
was like I
important to
never
know.
understood why the Railroad
Yeah.
Commission is in charge of spills.
Mm-hmm.
But now we know. Thank you.
Texas Railroad Commission has a very interesting history and worth reading about. I'll say that.
Okay, so here is Diana and Austin's contact information. So if you have any questions or want to talk to them about, plan or updating the plan, do you update plans? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Are they required to update your plan?
If you are required to have a plan, you are required to update it at certain times.
All right.
Yes.
There you go. And so those are really good pictures, by the way. I just wanted to let you know that y'all did
They
good
were
on
not
that
taken
day.
with their phones.
Lance, where's your picture?
I have a really good picture, so I would. I'm kidding.
That was Charles in charge.
You can see it on LinkedIn. And our next webinar, which is actually the last webinar of the year, it's closing contaminated groundwater sites. It's going to be really great, actually, with Frank and Clay. And so it's going to be on September 27th, same time, same place, except this one's in Austin. The next one's going to be in Plano. But and then you can go to it on our events page by that link right there. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. It was great timing. It was fit right at, we nailed it. We were a little worried going over, but we were great. So thank you guys.
To eat lunch.
Yes. So
Thanks,
Austin,
Lance.
Diana, thank you so much.
Thank you,
and
Lance.
we'll see you on the next webinar.
All right.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
We can go back to work now.
Are you done now?
I think so.
Yes, it turned off.
All right. Good job.
Oh, y'all did good. That was good.
Yeah, that was good to get that. I wonder who. Do you know who gave you that comment?
Probably Andy.
On the Railroad
Yes.
Commission.
Andy.
It was
Andy, yeah.
because I'm reading this book right now. The guy was